So hello and welcome to our session today on top 10 mistakes to avoid when working on your systematic or scoping review. My name is Ashley Farrell, and I'm an information specialist with UHN Library and Information Services. So now we'll begin today's session, but just before we begin, a quick note on terminology. This session is mainly about systematic and scoping reviews, but a lot of it will also apply to the wider world of reviews. And I may use terms like systematic review, knowledge synthesis, and method-driven reviews somewhat interchangeably. For all of them, I'm referring to any research that collates and synthesizes primary studies, usually in a systematic manner, unless otherwise noted. Such as this slide here, where I will be talking about systematic reviews specifically. So systematic reviews sit at the top of the evidence pyramid. Like other reviews, they are a collection of evidence that gives us the chance to make decisions informed by multiple pieces of information. However, the value of a systematic review over a narrative review or a regular literature review is that it aims to minimize bias at every step of the process. Ideally, a systematic review will identify all available evidence on a topic to answer its question. It does so with a comprehensive literature search using transparent and reproducible methods. The steps taken to minimize and address bias are what makes systematic reviews so valuable and reliable for decision-making, especially in healthcare. Systematic reviews took off in the 90s shortly after the introduction of evidence-based medicine, and that's not a coincidence. The lemon on the slide here is for fun mostly, and it's also for James Lind, who is known for creating one of the first clinical trials to establish that citrus can cure scurvy. He was also probably the first person to describe knowledge synthesis methods as means to mitigate the bias of primary reports. And this happened all the way back in the 18th century. It would take another 200 years for that idea to become the knowledge synthesis landscape that we know today. So the overall workflow of systematic reviews and other method-driven reviews is fairly consistent. And I'm going into this session assuming that you have some knowledge of the process, so I won't go into too much detail. But we start by first developing our research question. Then we develop and execute a comprehensive search strategy. Then we go through the literature and a process of screening to identify relevant research. And then we pull out the relevant data from that research in the process of data abstraction. And finally, we synthesize the results, which can involve a process of assessing the quality of the primary research. As a librarian, I'm mostly familiar with the start of the process, and that's what I'll be focusing on today. Someone like a statistician might have a different top 10 list, but I think I will be covering the foundation here. At every stage of this process, there are steps in place to help us minimize bias so that bias doesn't accumulate in our results and affect the integrity of our conclusions. However, flawed reviews get published all the time, and some of them can be pretty rough. We can always do better. This session is not meant to shame anyone or make anyone feel bad about their work. The goal is to highlight best practices, address common misconceptions about working on reviews, and identify potential pitfalls or barriers to quality. We want you to be comfortable in recognizing sources of bias and provide tools to help navigate the challenges of working on these projects. So to get to the meat of the presentation, the top 10 mistakes to avoid when working on your systematic and scoping review, according to an information specialist. So the first one is thinking that the review is going to be easy, cheap, and quick. I think there's a misconception that because you don't have human subjects and you don't need ethics approval and you can basically do everything from a desk, that reviews are an easier type of research and are beginner friendly. But that's not really the case. Reviews can be difficult as well. They're just a different kind of difficult. Most obviously is the time commitment. You can reasonably expect to work on a review for a year or longer. And during this time, you might be devoting a few hours or even full work days every week to either project management, screening, reading articles, chasing down citations, record management, and more. Reviews can be great learning environments for students and new researchers, but they are not solo beginner projects. A team of 4 with a mix of subject and methodological experts is a great start. For larger reviews, you might need a larger team, especially for screening, and you may have to start considering personnel costs. You'll also need access to academic literature, bibliographic databases, and citation and review management tools. And these are often invisible costs covered by institutional or library subscriptions. And if our library subscriptions don't cover every full text article you need for the review, we will do our best to find a copy, often for free, but sometimes we can't, and there will be a charge. So it's always a good idea to have a budget to cover the costs of articles. This is not as much of an issue at UHN or if you're at U of T or another large institution, but accessing these resources as an individual or small team or in a resource-limited setting can be very costly very quickly. It's easy to underestimate these aspects of the project, but they definitely come with their own challenges, and we see folks coming into these projects underestimating these elements. Moving on to number 2, calling a scoping review a systematic review, or vice versa. The classic type of systematic review for intervention studies was established in the 90s to inform evidence-based medicine, but this specific methodology doesn't work for all healthcare questions or disciplines. Evidence-based practice was a huge paradigm shift across healthcare practice, education, and research. We created a hierarchy of evidence and put systematic reviews at the top, and we started prioritizing literature reviews with comprehensive and rigorous methods because we needed the best evidence. But just because a review has a systematic search and is conducted in a systematic way doesn't make it a systematic review necessarily. Over time, new review methodologies have been developed, and the landscape of method-driven reviews has become very diverse. In 2005, articles trying to define and provide guidance on scoping studies, realist reviews, and integrative reviews were published. In 2009, Grant and Booth published a typology of reviews that identified 14 different methodologies. Over time, many of these methodologies have become more recognized and established and come with specific methodological and reporting guidelines. My point in showing this timeline on the slide and all of these developments is that even though there is overlapping terminology and methodological characteristics, and historically the review landscape has been a little messy, there are several distinct, well-established review methodologies the researchers should be considering when starting a knowledge synthesis project. And in 2026, there is enough information and guidance out there that there's no reason to still be calling something a systematic review that isn't a systematic review. So, which review should you do if you're not certain? Especially if they all can include comprehensive literature searches and systematic methods, how do you decide what methodology to go with? The bottom line is that the research question and the purpose should inform which review methodology to use. If you're interested in learning more about the different review types and what they're best suited for, we have a Write Review workshop recording available on our website on our workshop page. But I also want to highlight this very neat Write Review tool, which you can use to help determine what review type you should be undertaking. It'll ask you several different questions, and then it'll provide you some guidance on what review type might be best for you. So I highly suggest either checking out the recording from our workshop session or this tool. But I want to speak specifically to systematic and scoping reviews because these are two of the most established methodologies. And these are the two that I often see a lot of confusion about. So I've heard the sentiment that scoping reviews aren't as rigorous, which is definitely not the case. They're both systematic in their methods and encourage transparency. A scoping review is not simply a systematic review without a bias assessment and shouldn't be used as a shortcut. Likewise, doing a systematic review because it's considered higher quality shouldn't be the motivation for doing one. The biggest difference is that systematic reviews are preferred for informing practice or policy, while scoping reviews are best suited for informing opportunities for future research. Scoping reviews can be used to inform practice or policy, but only in a limited capacity, while systematic reviews should be able to provide a degree of certainty in its recommendations. It's important to name them appropriately because we want readers to know what to expect. If it calls itself a systematic review, but doesn't really follow a systematic review methodology, what do we call it? There can be low confidence in the rest of the review if researchers aren't using the most appropriate methodology for their question.
Yeah, Ashley, I think we have a hand up. Could we take a pause here to take a question?
Sure, I'm happy to answer here, or if you want to put through the chat, that's great as well, whichever you prefer.
I think it was Candace. You can unmute.
Oh, okay, no question. Sorry about that. Oh, but we have someone else typing, so. Yes, we will do that, Susan. It looks like questions are resolved. Thanks, Ashley.
Okay, perfect. If there's any other questions, yeah, you please feel free to raise your hand, or if you send it through the chat, then Amelia will be able to answer it too. Just because I might not see it right away, and then I might be moving on to a completely different point at that time, but happy to answer any of them. Okay, now I'm going to move on to number 3, which is going in without a protocol. So a protocol is basically a roadmap for your review, and that helps you plan out your process and make any decisions about the review at the beginning. It's a chance to define your topic and develop a deeper understanding of the question. It's also really important to establish detailed inclusion and exclusion criteria before you try to develop a search strategy, and definitely before you start screening. In addition, working on a protocol gives you a chance to think about what tools and other resources you'll need down the line. And even though reviews are systematic, they still require a lot of judgment calls at different moments throughout the process. In order to minimize bias and mistakes, you need detailed instructions for how to navigate the situation. You don't want to have the results you're retrieving unintentionally change how you're conducting your review, which isn't good practice. It's also a good idea to publish or register your protocol. That way you're staking a claim on the topic and making your work transparent. Systematic review protocols can be published in Prospero, listed on the slide. While if you're working on a scoping review, you can set up pre-registration through Open Science Framework to publish your protocol. Some journals will also accept protocols, such as BMJ Open and JMIR Research Protocols, which gives you an opportunity to have your protocol peer-reviewed and also published as an additional publication. It can be very tempting to jump into your review without a protocol, and it may seem like double the work to have to put together yet another document. But having a detailed protocol can in fact make it easier to write your manuscript down the line and save you stress along the way. And also just guarantees that everyone on your team is on the same page. For more information, including protocol templates to help you get started, please be sure to check out our guide on the virtual library page on writing protocols. And I will mention that all of the slides will be sent to you after today. So you'll be able to get access to the link for our slide there, or you can find it on our virtual library page. So now number 4, which is on using Prisma as methodological guidelines. So this is a sentence that I often see in abstracts where the author states, We conducted the review according to Prisma guidelines, and I was getting confused. Eventually, I just started to think that it's become such a common phrase to have in an abstract that authors often include it without thinking. But this is where I may be a bit judgmental, but Prisma cannot be used to guide the conduct or methodology of a review. That's not its purpose. Prisma is a set of reporting guidelines. It provides guidance for presenting your methods and findings transparently so that your research is reproducible. I will say that whenever I see these sentences, I start to lose confidence in a paper. Prisma also just isn't a flow diagram, as many might think. There's more to reporting than that. It involves a checklist, and there are Prisma extensions like Prisma for searching and Prisma for harm outcomes. It's not uncommon for articles to say we reported in accordance with Prisma to often be missing critical elements of Prisma reporting, or they're still citing the old version of Prisma, Prisma 2009. As a quick check to see if Prisma 2020 is being used, I would be looking for an updated flow diagram. The one that's pictured here on this slide is an old one and is out of date. I would also be looking for all databases, the search strategy for all databases, as that is a requirement of Prisma 2020. So if you can't use Prisma to guide the conduct of a review, what should you use? There are various methodological guidelines for conducting the different types of reviews. For systematic reviews, there's the Cochrane Handbook, which is available for free online. And there's also the JBI manual, which covers a few different review types, including scoping reviews. These are two of the most established and well-known resources for methodological guidance, especially for systematic reviews. Guidelines for other review types might require a bit more digging, but many of these best practices are widely applicable. For example, the process of screening is roughly going to be the same for different review types. Now, number 5, which is one we see often at the library, which is reaching out to the library too late. Many university and hospital libraries offer some sort of support for method-driven reviews, ranging from providing access to databases and resources to joining the review team as an expert searcher and co-author. Here at UHN, we provide a full range of support for these projects, and you can check out more information on our website. We're here to support you in your research and learning, but there are a few things to keep in mind to really benefit from our support, and the main thing is to reach out to us early in the process. If you're thinking of doing a systematic review on a topic and you're putting together a grant proposal, set up a consult with your information specialist. You don't want to be stuck in a situation where you've promised a funder a review on a topic that ends up not being feasible, and we're pretty good at anticipating challenges you might have. We can offer suggestion and guidance, help you refine your topic and research question. We can also offer advice on developing your own search strategy or give suggestions for tools to use. If you want to collaborate on a review with an information specialist, reaching out early gives us a better chance of meeting your timelines, and we can contribute more during the early stages of planning. It also helps us get a better understanding of the topic for when we develop the search. In these cases, we do expect some form of protocol before we start on the search, which is another great reason to work on your protocol, to make sure that everyone's on the same page and ready to go. So number 6, also related to searching. So I could probably do a whole presentation just on search strategies, but we tried to pick just 1 or 2 points. So when I'm reading a systematic review, one of the first things I check for is the search strategy. And if the search is missing elements such as subject headings, synonyms, relevant databases, or supplementary search methods, I'm not going to have a lot of confidence in the results or conclusions. The type of searching that's done for systematic and scoping reviews is called comprehensive searching, or sometimes called systematic searching or exhaustive searching. Remember that we're trying to identify all relevant literature on the topic, and that's much easier said than done. We end up having to cast a pretty wide net because we want the search to be sensitive enough to capture those odd outliers, even if it means including a bunch of irrelevant studies too. In order to be comprehensive, we need to include a lot of variation in our methods. This means using the database tags called subject headings and also brainstorming synonyms, even ones that aren't as obvious. For example, wheelchair and smartwatch can be synonyms in a search if the topic is assistive technology. We also want to be searching multiple databases because different databases cover different journals or subject areas. It's also a good idea to include supplementary search methods like citation tracking or checking the contents of key journals in addition. Developing a comprehensive search strategy takes time. Usually we'd say around 8 weeks, but this could be longer depending on the topic. And it takes practice, learning all of the quirks of the database and different techniques you can use. Usually a search that's missing any of those key elements had no involvement from a librarian. And that's a shame because the search is the foundation of the review. The search is how we collect our research data. Now on to number 7, where we're going to be talking about limits to avoid, specifically date, language, and publication type limits. Limits and filters are basically the same thing. They're ways to limit your search and narrow your results, but it's not always necessary or advisable to do so, particularly with a systematic or another type of methods-driven review. All limits should be justified, but there are some limits I see often in the literature that I'm often asked to include. But generally, I'd advise not to because they're difficult to justify in the context of comprehensive searching. A common limit I get asked about is date limits. In my experience, date limits tend to be very arbitrarily applied, such as we limited from 2000 to present, or we looked at the last 10 years. And I always wonder, why these time periods for this particular topic? Why is evidence from 1999 or 1989 not relevant? Date limits can work well if there was a major change or an innovation that you can pinpoint or cite at a particular period of time. For example, if your topic is health professions education post-COVID-19, you can very easily justify having a date limit of 2019 to present. Ideally, we would include all articles regardless of language. That way we're minimizing language bias where we can. I get that there's often isn't capacity to translate all potentially relevant full text articles, but I usually recommend including them in the search and reading the English translated abstract, and then excluding them at the full text stage. That way you might not actually come across any potentially relevant non-English language articles in the first place. And if you do, just report which articles were excluded by language. This gives you and your audience a better idea of what the language bias might be. Chances are, though, you may not even have to exclude anything, and then you won't have to report the excluded by language at all. And this is a comment I'll say that I have seen come up in the peer review process regarding adding on language limits or date limits as well. Another limit type are publication limits. So publication type is a tricky one. Some publication types, like editorials and commentaries, are probably safe to exclude, but sometimes I'm asked to remove conference abstracts or only to include peer-reviewed literature, and I would caution against doing so. Conference abstracts may have limited data, but they can still be the result of a really well-done study and have valuable conclusions. They can also be great for new and emerging topics, especially when there's not much written out there in the peer-reviewed literature. We know that positive results are more likely to be published as journal articles, so excluding conference abstracts and preprints can contribute to publication bias. So we're moving on now from the searching stage to screening and data abstraction for mistake number 8, which is having only one researcher conducting the screening and data abstraction. The Cochrane Handbook recommends at least 2 people work independently and in duplicate. So basically, every study should be assessed by 2 different people who can bring their own rich perspectives and preconceptions to the decision. Yes, that can increase the chances of conflicts and having to review the same record again. But the goal is to gain a more level understanding of the topic and make sure that relevant studies aren't accidentally excluded. So be wary of systematic reviews or scoping reviews that are published by a single author. Mistake number 9 here is a bit of a follow-up from number 4, where we talked about Prisma. Specifically, as a librarian, I notice when search and screening methods are poorly reported in a review. As a quick check for Prisma 2020 compliance, if I was looking at a systematic review, I would be looking for an updated flow diagram, like the one pictured here, which is the most basic version of the new 2020 flow diagram. In the most basic version, which is for reviews where you're searching in databases and registers only, there is an extra step to report how many full text articles you weren't able to retrieve, if any. Documentation-wise, I would also be looking for all database search strategies, because as mentioned previously, that is a requirement of Prisma 2020. A lot of authors or journals are still only publishing one search strategy or no search strategies. But the search is the bulk of the methods. The best way to ensure that another researcher can replicate your study is to give them the step-by-step methods and queries you used. Prisma 2020 also encourages authors to distinguish between the number of studies and the number of reports. It's not uncommon for researchers to publish multiple articles about one study, but those should be identified. And now, finally, last one, number 10. Although I should say these have not been in any particular order. So number 10 is avoid having a topic that is too broad, subjective, or abstract, which is something I do see commonly. Let's look at an example and talk a bit about the problem with quality of life. So let's say you're looking at a topic examining the quality of life in skin cancer patients. I'm now going to ask everyone here if they wouldn't mind participating in a little activity by trying to define quality of life, by identifying what are the synonyms and words you would use to describe aspects of quality of life. So I'll give a few minutes for this, and you can enter your answers into the chat. So in thinking about the topic of quality of life, how would you search for this? What are the terms you would use? What are the potential synonyms or words that might come up to describe quality of life? And I see one answer. Actually, I'm going to ask Amelia if you wouldn't mind reading some of the answers out loud, because I only see the brief window preview and then they disappear.
Yeah, sounds good. So
Thank you.
Susan mentioned measures of the construct, like Euro, QOL, and SF36. Great answer.
Great.
I think that's a very, very like specific one.
Yeah, that's great, because you definitely want to be including those scales in a search strategy.
So I guess Susan, if you are familiar, what are some of the questions that they have in like the Euro QOL, for example? You don't have to answer if you don't want to. Oh, we have another answer from Nicholas. So we've got utility, specific symptoms, functional status. Nicholas, what sort of symptoms do you think would come up in quality of life? again, you don't have to kind of expand on it, but these are the kind of questions that as a librarian, like I would ask, like when we're trying to define quality of life. Because we can't just search for the words, symptoms. We have to also kind of search for the specific symptoms. Exactly, pain, cosmetics, sleep, anxiety and depression. Yeah. I agree with your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, those are all really great points. And yeah, Amelia raises a really good point too, that when we're in a meeting and discussing a review project with clients, if someone said their topic was quality of life, one of my initial questions would be, are you referring to quality of life when it comes to functionality and activities of daily living? Are you talking about quality of life when it comes to psychological or emotional well-being? Or is it physically getting well, like cosmetic, as was just said through the chat? Or is it things like personal autonomy, social support? Um, is it happiness in general or well-being? There's a variety of different ways we could describe it in different areas. And depending on what the client is interested in looking at for their review or what the topic is, those are all different things that I would ask and be thinking about in order to build what would probably end up being a very large a search hedge for quality of life. Are there any other ideas or synonyms or words that people can think of?
I'll also say that like this came up with the rest of the librarians as well recently, where somebody had asked to do a quality of life search, and I think we identified like 9 different aspects of quality of life based on something from the World Health Organization, and then from there it just kind of keeps building and building and building. So this is a question that definitely comes up, and it's something that we have a lot of questions about to kind of get into like a definition in order to even start searching for it.
Yeah, and it's a great example of how on its face value, you might think, oh, you just search quality of life and you don't think too much about it. But with some of these topics, especially more nebulous ones, how you really have to really think about what synonyms and words you want to use to make sure you're not missing relevant articles. And it becomes a lot more complex searching and topic, and sometimes brings in a lot more results than you might think too, as well. And I think I also saw through the chat that someone mentioned activities of daily living. And yes, that's definitely a subject heading and a concept that I would include for quality of life as well. That's another great example.
And we have to think about the way that we're limited to searching the title and the abstract of articles. We can't search the full text in general. So we have to think about the ways that authors describe something like quality of life. So not just, the official maybe definition, like there might be like an official definition of something, but you have to think of all the ways that people have been talking about it. The way they talk about it now, the way they've talked about it in the past. If you have no reason to exclude those things, then, so the example I sometimes give is like, we call it like mpox now. That's kind of the official term, but we would still have to search monkeypox, even if it's not the official term, because we wouldn't want to necessarily exclude older studies that used those older terms.
Yeah, that's a really great example as well, because yeah, often when we're putting together searches, people will be asking why we're using old terminology, and it's to find those older articles, or sometimes there still can be recent articles where they're using older terminology too. So there's a lot of different variations and things you need to think about when you're putting together a search, especially if you want it to be a comprehensive and exhaustive search where you're not going to miss relevant articles. And Amelia made a really good point about how we are limited in the fields in terms of what we can search. So usually, yes, just the subject heading and the title and abstract. And it really commonly happens where someone might say, oh, this word is in the full text, this specific word, but then unfortunately we can't search the full text. So we have to really think about how things are going to be either indexed or how they're described within the citation abstract itself. Okay, great. Seeing nothing else come through the chat, thank you for your participation in that activity. I think this is a really great example to think about the complications sometimes when putting together comprehensive searches and also just conducting reviews in general. So yeah, as we've talked a bit about this, how with the issue of quality of life, that systematic reviews are also designed for very specific questions. And so topics that are broad, subjective, abstract, nebulous, it can be hard to search them in a comprehensive way. And sometimes, depending on if it's a very large or nebulous topic to get at, it can take forever to fully operationalize the topic. And you can end up with far too many results, sometimes before and after screening. So that's why we usually talk to people about making sure you have a narrow focus specific question, and also talk about some of the issues with some of these concepts, such as quality of life, and how they can very easily blow up a search depending on what you need to be searching. Because you might have to think about, looking through well over 10,000 results, or imagine trying to synthesize even 1,000 papers. That's how big these reviews can get if you have a very, very broad and subjective topic. So if that happens, you either need to find a way to limit your topic, or better yet, I've sneakily added another mistake into here, but sometimes a mistake can be doing a systematic review. And this might be an unpopular take, but considering not doing a systematic review or a scoping review or an umbrella or an integrative review, consider methodologies that allow for a pragmatic search rather than a comprehensive or exhaustive search. Think about doing a really good narrative review. That's going to be more valuable than promising a comprehensive, rigorously done project and then delivering a flawed product. It's okay to recognize that sometimes the biggest mistake is doing a systematic or scoping review in the first place. I know that we have pressure from supervisors and funders and peers, but I want to end this session by saying that you don't have to put yourself through the process if it doesn't feel right or if it's not working. And these are very long and time intensive projects to put yourself through something like that if you think it's not the right fit or you don't have time for it. Ultimately, do what's best for you and whatever helps you meet your goals, but reach out to the library early. We'll do our best to help you find a project that better suits your topic, your capacity, resources, and goals. And that's it for us today. So thank you for joining. I am more than happy to stick around for the rest of the time if there are any additional questions. Again, you can send them through the chat if you're more comfortable doing that, or you can also unmute yourself and ask them out loud as well. It looks like someone has their hand up, I think I can see.
Yeah, it's Susan.
Susan?
That's me.
Hi.
Yes, this was excellent, really timely, because I'm actually considering on writing probably a scoping review. So really, really great timing. In terms of setting up an appointment with yourself, one of the librarians, that's just done through the website.
Yes, actually, I think this information might be on the next slide.
Okay.
Let me look. Yes, so we have information on this side about search assistance. And you know what, I'll actually just go live to our virtual library page because we actually just updated the page as of yesterday. So it may look a little bit different from last time you looked at it. So if you are interested in talking with an information specialist about your scoping review, we have this research support section in the center of the page, and there is a page here on knowledge synthesis support.
Okay, I see that. Perfect. Thank you.
You're welcome. And then so there's information here about librarians' roles in knowledge synthesis projects. We have 3 different support options depending on if you'd prefer to have a consult session with us, if you want to develop your own search strategy and have us advise, etc. Or which is what's more recommended, you can have us collaborate and be a part of your scoping review. And so we would be a member of your team, we would do the searches, everything like that. And so we have a knowledge synthesis project proposal form here, which we ask our clients to fill out and then send us a copy of your protocol, even if it's in progress. We usually like to see both of those documents. And if you're not certain who your information specialist, but if my memory serves, do you still work for the bariatric program?
Yes, yes, good
Okay,
memory.
okay, great.
Yeah.
Great. Then I would be your information specialist still. So
Perfect.
you can just reach out to me directly then. Otherwise, I was going to say there's another place on the website you can find out who it is, but in this case, that would be me.
Great. And actually, while I'm thinking of this, is there a fee for this? Like, is that required to use your services?
No, so there isn't any fees with our with supporting systematic reviews.
Okay.
At the very bottom of the knowledge synthesis page, we do have some information about certain fee-based services, but for the most part, these aren't utilized. There are things such as if you'd want us to remove duplicates before giving you the results, or searching individual conferences, participating in the screening process, etc. But if you would want me on your team in conducting the searches, exporting the results, that there would be no cost for that.
Okay, thanks for clarifying that.
You're welcome. Are there any other questions? I think we still have about 15 minutes. While people might be thinking about questions or maybe mulling over the session a bit, I will just point out here that if you're interested in looking at recordings, either this workshop recording or any of our previous workshops, they're available on our UHN.ca workshops page. And again, Raluca is going to send you the slides after the session today, so you'll have access to all this information and all of the links. So you can get the recordings for any of our past sessions. They're available through YouTube. We also do one-on-one or group sessions on demand. So if you would like a training session on something specific, maybe you'd like to learn how to conduct a comprehensive search in a database like Medline or Embase or something like that, you can reach out and fill out one of our request forms, and then you can set up a meeting, a training session with an information specialist. And so we can help you on a variety of different topics related to searching, using citation managers, any questions related to research, publishing, things such as that, you can reach out to us. And then, as we say at the bottom here, we also provide search assistance. So you can either contact us for a consultation for a literature search or a search for a review or knowledge synthesis project, or you can submit a literature search request to us. So the literature search request form is commonly used for quote unquote regular literature searches or searches you might do for a narrative or traditional review. But you can also contact us that way if you have a systematic review that you're working on. Just state that you're working on a knowledge synthesis or systematic review project. And then we normally need a bit more information from you at that point, and then we can reach out and have a discussion and get started. So again, for regular literature searches, we can do the search for you. If we're a member and co-author of a team for a bigger project, such as a systematic or scoping review, we can also help with the searches for that kind of project as well. So if there are no other questions, you are more than free to leave and get 12 minutes of your day back. If you have any further questions, please feel free to stick around and we can answer them. But if you need to leave, thank you so much for attending the session today. I hope it was helpful. And I'll just mention that we do have an evaluation form that you can fill out. We're always looking to get feedback on how we can improve or revise our sessions, and always looking for ideas about sessions that people might need that maybe we aren't currently teaching right now. That's very helpful too, to get ideas for new workshops. So you can fill out the evaluation form through that link or through the QR code. And we also have a mailing list and a newsletter that you can sign up for too through that QR code. I believe we only send out a newsletter once a month, so we try not to spam you. But if you want to learn the latest of what's going on at our library in terms of new workshops or resources, you can get that information through our newsletter.